A.B. Freeman came to New Orleans around 1906 or 1907 and had an opportunity to take all of his life savings, and at a time when it was a very risky move, to come to New Orleans and try to rescue a bottling company on its third try. So it had gone bankrupt 2 previous times. And the bottling factory bottled Coca-Cola products. A.B. Freeman had 3 children, R.W. Freeman, Mary Freeman, who married William B. Wisdom, and Rosa Freeman, who married Chuck Keller. So those are the 3 branches of the Freeman family today. The different generations, they've been handed this wonderful opportunity to make a difference in this community, and they've taken a hold of it and they've done it. The Rosa Mary Foundation is named for my grandmother Mary and my great aunt Rosa. The R.W. Freeman branch of the family has been more of what I would call institutional philanthropy. Finding institutions that are making an impact in the city that are critically important for this city. Now that could be education, it could be the arts. And on the other side, my Keller cousins, I would say their philanthropy has been more defined by social activism and trying to find solutions to take care of people that are in need. If those are the 2 poles of the Freeman family philanthropy, I would say the Wisdom branch is really in the middle, because I and my father, his sisters Betty and Adelaide, as well as his parents, felt strongly about institutional philanthropy and about what I would call social service philanthropy. It would be impossible to grow up in this family and not be exposed to that to one degree or another.
Rosa Keller was on the board of the UNCF, and everywhere I turned, she was somewhere helping, and so did her family. They were doing things for education, they were doing things for housing, they were doing things for fixing the problem between those who have and those who have not.
My grandmother, Rosa Keller, was definitely a trailblazer in her time. One of her first big endeavors was to work with the mayor of the city, Chet Morrison, to integrate New Orleans public libraries. She was out there fighting for social justice, and that continued through to when she was in her 80s and testified before the New Orleans City Council on behalf of LGBTQ rights.
I was really privileged to know Rosa Keller and to have gotten to work with her on a really important project back in the 1980s, when as a very young woman I was the director of the Louisiana ACLU. And at that time, gay rights was a very controversial issue. There were very few straight people, especially people of reputation and high social standing in the community, who were willing to stand up for gay rights. But Rosa Keller did. Just as with the civil rights movement years before, she understood that everyone needed to be treated equally, that everyone needed to be included, that discrimination was morally wrong. And she didn't care what the consequences were of taking a position for that.
He invited my wife to bring 4 of my kids to swim in her pool uptown. We couldn't swim wherever else we could do, but she said, come swim there. I said, oh boy, we gonna break the law? She said, I don't care.
And when you look at the history of that family, they were really very progressive at a time when race relations in the country were really bad. Pretty much since Dillard has been located where we are in the 1930s, there's been a member of that family closely associated with the university. There's a row of oak trees that line the campus, and it's known as the Rosa Freeman Keller Avenue of Oaks in honor of her.
When I thought about who did I want to name our flagship permanent supportive housing building for people with disabilities who were actually sleeping on the street, the person I thought most embodied what we were trying to do, which was to build a New Orleans that is equitable, that includes everyone. That's what her whole life stood for. And I couldn't think of any person that embodied that as well as she.
I'm Madeline Shank. I'm a friend of Mary Zervigon. The 2 of us worked for 15 years on getting a building for the New Orleans Charter Science and Math High School. When I first met Mary, she was chairing a meeting. And for those who know Mary, she doesn't mince words, nor does she look for every person in the room to say something.
My mother is famous for attending meetings and knitting. And so she would knit while the meeting was going on, click, 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 even meetings that she was chairing. But when she wanted to ask a question, it would be zap, and everybody stood up. She would ask a question. She always had a pointed question to ask, a good question that everyone listened to. It's her style. Over time, there's been a change of generational participation as folks have, retired from the foundation and younger folks have come on. And that's really exciting because everybody thinks differently and has a different life experience. And I hope it continues for generations to come.
I think the families and their foundations have been among the most important private philanthropists in the last half century. Since they were so involved with New Orleans society, they were really role models for other families to be philanthropic, not just in the arts, but in education and health services. And the Freemans have been supporting all of those aspects of the city life.
One of the values I've always found with all three of the families, it was never about them.
It's been a family tradition to give to nonprofits, and it's also been somewhat of a tradition to do it without fanfare.
Through 80 years of philanthropy, you don't see the name Freeman on a lot of buildings and a lot of things, although the money has been everywhere. A present-day value of philanthropic impact over 80 years or so of just under $300 million in the city of New Orleans.
I might have met Louis Freeman a year or two after the D-Day Museum opened. And Louis Freeman, with his rich and deep experience in philanthropy, agreed to lead our capital campaign. Louis, who had a World War II connection through his father, and he had a passion and curiosity for history. It wasn't just his philanthropy. He believed in what this museum could become. He was a big thinker, a big idea guy. He's become a great friend and a great champion, and he's still on the board as an emeritus member, which I am as well. He's still active, and he's still giving.
The history and the progress of Tulane University has been intertwined with the Freeman family for over 100 years. Universities and schools are about people, and that means the faculty and the students. And the Freeman family recognized that from day one and has supported, endowed 5 different chairs and professorships that have attracted and supported some of the best faculty across this country, educating the next generation of business leaders.
The Freeman Challenges are a fundraising opportunity for nonprofits to get a grant from the Richard West Freeman Endowment and Board Reserve Challenges. It is also an educational opportunity. It's an endowment readiness workshop. It was started by my father, my aunt, and my uncle about 20 years ago to honor my grandfather, Richard West Freeman. And so many of these groups, because they're nonprofits, they're dependent on donations, and that, as we've seen with the pandemic, can vary wildly. If they have a base like an endowment that is permanent and can generate funds, then they can continue a lot easier.
Raising funds for us to sustain ourselves has been a bit stressful. The Freeman Challenge and the Greater New Orleans Foundation, they have given us the tools and the resources in order to move our mission forward and expand our mission within the next 10, 20, 30 years, maybe 100 years.
It really has been a godsend to not-for-profits that have had the opportunity to be part of the challenge. The Freemans have been the greatest champion for that kind of long-term sustainability for organizations like ours in our community.
The challenge was started because my grandfather wanted these organizations to be sustainable. Seems to be working so far, which is great, and it is definitely following what he wanted.
There's a long history between Ochsner and the Freeman and Wisdom families going back really to the founding of Ochsner. From Dick Freeman in the 40s to Richard Freeman Jr. to now Andy Wisdom as our board chair. Their gift of time and wisdom and guidance to help us kind of go through challenging times, to go through a pandemic over the past couple of years, has been absolutely instrumental and critical to our success.
I could say without a doubt that the Audubon Zoo would not exist without the Freeman family, the Keller family, and the Wisdom family. In the 60s, late 60s, early 70s, There was a New York Times article to describe the zoo as an animal ghetto. The question was, close it down or fix it up. Fortunately, we had leadership of this incredible family that said, let's fix it up. The mayor said, I'm all in. They paid for the study, the feasibility study, the master plan came back, and that was the beginning of the zoo. Betty Wisdom became chair of our board, and she kind of was known as the mother of the zoo. She was a wonderful, kind, caring, loving person of wildlife. Any animal was her friend.
The families that we're talking about now knew what an investment in education was, knew what an investment in housing was. It's all part of believing in humanity.
I haven't, in many instances, had to look outside of my own family to find the heroes that I want to emulate. My earliest memories are of civic affairs being discussed at the dinner table and around the family. And 4 generations in, you can't conceive of another way of living. Participating, being involved, caring deeply about this city is just something that is just part of you.
Philanthropy, charity is not in your DNA. It's a learned behavior, it's a learned value. And I think it's the leadership of the parents that have stressed this over these generations. And I found all 3 of these families really had that long vision that what can we do today that's going to impact the children of the future.
A lot of us have stayed here. As a citizen of New Orleans, I've felt blessed to be able to give back. The city is worth fighting for.
Without foundations and resources and generosity of families like the Freemans, the Kellers, and the Wisdoms, you're not able to build things. You have to have that resources.
I can't think of a family that's done more for our community.
This is what you do if you say you really care about something and not just you talk about it. They've always been a family of action. They're radical too a bit. I like that part about it. I think they're radical, but that in a really good way. So, you know, people talk about John Lewis and Good Trouble. They're the picture of what he looks like.
Somebody said, how would you describe love? Oh, well, I would describe it as something I read. It said, love is wishing good for somebody else and causing it to be done.